Welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm Sima Vasa, your host. I'm so excited to invite Kelly Monahan, who is the co-founder of Beyond the Desk. Kelly, welcome to the podcast. We had you on, I think, a few years ago, and I'm so
Yes.
glad to have you back again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been, and you've also had a lot of change in your life. I mean, we've talked about, the last time we spoke, we talked about um, workforce trends, and you were full-time somewhere, and
Yep.
now you kind of launched your own practice and business.
Yes. Yes. So I think the last time we spoke, I was just transitioning out of Meta. I was their first
Yes.
future of work researcher, director. Great experience, spent time in the metaverse. Realized there wasn't enough people in the metaverse to study. So made the transition to Upwork and started their research institute
Nice.
because we were studying the impact of AI was having in the freelancer market. So got 4 years of an in-depth view of what AI is actually
Wow.
doing to jobs and tasks. And it just got to the point, I don't know if you're feeling the same way, that it feels like the runway is getting shorter for actually getting this moment right. And
Yeah.
so it just made sense. I had the right co-founder to come alongside of me and just take a chance and actually start helping and advise leaders as they're going
Yeah.
through tremendous amounts of transition today.
That's amazing. And when did you found the company? Was it just recently?
November? Yes, November of 2025.
Wow, good for you.
Yes.
That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
And you also
Yes.
moved locations. You moved from,
Yes.
right? That's a big
Yes,
change
so
too.
it is a big change. I mean, listen, I gotta practice what I preach. I'm all about accelerating through change, so here I am. Yeah, I, along with, like, millions of other Americans,
Yeah.
relocated from the Northeast. New York and Philadelphia were not quite the same during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and, Florida, allured me. So, no state income tax, beaches. I'm like, "I'm gonna start living my best life now."
Good for you. Good for you. And so now you're working on content related to, I know your new book's
Yeah.
coming up, but just tell us a little bit in
Yeah.
terms of where your focus has been since you founded the company.
Yeah. So it's funny. The new book coming out is called Reclaim the Plot. But my
Okay.
focus right now is because I think we've lost the plot of what
Yeah.
business is all about in a couple different domains.
Yeah.
One, I think AI is actually causing a pressure test to ask us, what is the purpose of business?
Yeah.
Is it truly pursuing shareholder wealth maximization at all expenses, which we're
Yeah.
seeing right now with AI development?
For sure.
And so I think we've lost the plot a bit of where we're going with that. The second thing is how we're showing up as leaders every day.
Yeah.
There is no leadership playbook when you're having to deal with 5 to 7 macroeconomic shocks in 1 year. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just unheard of.
Yep.
And so really focus on how do you help leaders navigate this new playbook that's required, because it's not linear growth. A SWOT analysis is no longer going to make sense. And as a
Mhm.
quantitative researcher, I'm even humbled. Like, we're moving into pure qualitative realm right now because looking
Yeah.
back and even getting survey data is becoming too outdated. So I'm really helping leaders navigate AI and more broadly the complexity. And then the
Okay.
final theme I'm focused on, I love Gen Z. I think they are going to really shake things up. I think we're beginning
Awesome.
to see some things,
Yeah.
and yet they're coming to the labor markets with really poor early entry pathways of really, I think, a lot of delirium and
Yeah.
confusion of what's happening. And so spending a
Yes.
lot of time of how do we get Gen Z back in the workforce and
Yep.
onboard it quickly.
Very cool. Let's talk about the first point first.
Yes.
Just, the history of the purpose of business. I
Yes.
know we've talked before and saying, business has not always been the way that we see it today in
Yeah.
terms of shareholder maximization at all cost.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being extreme in saying that. But before, I guess, the 70s, there was a different
Yeah.
kind of playbook or philosophy as to why businesses exist and what their focus or foci was. Is that right?
Yep.
It's plural.
I
Yeah.
think that makes
Anyway.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that, because I don't think
Yeah.
people fully really realize.
Got it. Yeah, I think to your point, we just have accepted it. Like,
Yeah.
business is just all about shareholder wealth,
Yeah.
profit, and we move on. So before the 1970s, business had a more of a stakeholder approach, meaning the purpose of business was to also serve local communities. Like, I'm from
Okay.
Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
Kodak may be a bad
I
example because I didn't
know.
keep up with the times.
Yeah.
However, I went to Rochester Institute of Technology. There was an
Yes.
Eastman Kodak investment, endowment,
Right.
ready to get business students out. There was an Eastman Kodak ballpark. There was just an investment in the local community into the workforce.
Yeah.
And so you saw during the 50s and 60s a much more balanced approach
Right.
to business and who they were serving. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, we're serving customers, right?
Mm.
And so you want to make sure you're showing up in a way that is aligned to customer value.
Mm.
But something happened in the 1970s with an economist, Milton Friedman, who
Mm.
wrote in New York Times op-ed. It was an opinion piece. It wasn't even
Right.
like an academic
Wasn't
journal.
a book. Yeah.
It wasn't a book.
Medical
And he
time. Yeah.
wrote and convinced a whole doctrine of business by saying this exact line in the New York Times, which is, it is the moral responsibility of business to maximize shareholder
Wow.
profits.
Yeah.
And that a whole bunch of universities, MBA programs took that as this is the new way forward to infuse growth.
Got it.
And honestly, like we have, like when you think about management, anyone who's got
Yeah.
an MBA, it's based on this theory called agency theory, meaning
Mhm.
we don't trust people want to work in the first place, and
Yeah.
they're never going to work for shareholder profits. And so
Right.
that's how we got this whole command and control,
Yeah.
really transactional style of leadership. And I think AI, for good or bad, is causing us. Is that really the path forward?
Right.
There's no way that's a sustainable path forward
Yeah.
without some sort of frustration and uprising, whether that's coming from rural communities where data centers are going into, rising inequality, mass layoffs. Like you cannot sustain a level of
Yeah.
success and high performance in this sort of environment.
Yeah. I mean, I think also and you alluded to it, it's like the concept was that people are inherently lazy,
Yes.
potentially, and so they need the oversight and management to ensure that the return on investment of those dollars that a person was paid could again contribute to shareholder maximization.
Yes. And I think when I talk and advise leaders today, I can almost
Yeah.
predict their employee engagement scores by asking their leadership team and board, do you trust people want to be at your organization? Like, do you trust
Mhm.
people are going to do the right thing? 50%
Right.
of people in my research say no, like a hard
Really?
no. And that to me, I think, is we look around and say, well, why does work feel so broken? Well, we've got to start right there. This is a huge mindset shift. If we don't think
Yeah.
people even want to be there or to contribute, we're never going to create policies and environments where they are allowed to flourish and allowed to
Yes.
contribute, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
So I feel like there was like the heyday, all these corporations. I remember IBM was like the gold
Yeah.
standard and like, everything was going great. Obviously, things have changed. Obviously the COVID made a big
Yeah.
kind of digital transformation and not an office, hybrid work. And now we have AI on top of it.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think the root drivers are that really are painful, not painful, but leaders are really struggling with as it relates to running and managing a business?
Yeah. I think right off the bat, before we even get into like AI and the
Sure.
people side, most industries today outside of AI are operating in a low to no growth environment. So I
Right.
think the macroeconomic headwinds have put leaders
True.
on the defensive posture and
Yep.
having to explain to their board why profit margins are decreasing. And
Yep.
that's because inflation and tariffs in the macroeconomic environment have just made the dollar much more
Right.
expensive than it was 4 years ago. So you could be doing the exact same thing and making less money
Yeah.
by changing nothing. And so I
Yeah.
think that is the backdrop of where a lot of the anxiety is coming from. The second root cause that I think, and I haven't actually done an official research study, but anyone
Sure.
out there who wants to,
Yeah.
what I am concerned about is during the pandemic, we got
Mhm.
into a chaotic mode of operating, mostly
Yeah.
because the world got turned upside down.
Mhm.
And in some industries, it was a life and death situation of what we were
Yeah.
dealing with.
Right.
My concern is that neuroscience of getting addicted to chaos is what I've seen up top. And I have not seen a slowdown. And if anything, I've seen an addiction to an
Yes.
accelerated speed. And I want to say, time out, the crisis is over.
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
is not a crisis. AI is
Yeah.
an opportunity, but we are treating it as if it's another pandemic and responding to it in the same way. And then the last thing is I think there's a really missed expectations right now between leaders and the workforce in terms of, again, we're talking about the purpose of business and just
Right.
having misaligned expectation. Leaders today, what are concerned about are playing checkers and not chess and are just trying to get it through the next quarterly
Ah.
earnings call. Where
Yeah.
workers are saying, what does my next 10 or 15-year career
Right.
look like? What is my employment looking like? What's my skilling looking like?
Yes.
Two different conversations happening at the board,
Yeah.
C-suite level, and workforce.
Almost like leaders are just trying to survive.
Oh,
And
100%.
right? And employees are like, "Well, you took that job. That's kind of quote unquote not my problem. I'm gonna
Yep.
plan life, and I need to figure out what that looks like." I love the analogy of checkers and chess. It's actually
Okay.
really spot on in terms of
Yes.
how we look at it. Um, but talk to me about this because I think especially like not especially, but in the research data analytics
Yeah.
space, we do a quarterly pulse among all CEOs in the industry, and you can really it holds true. People are not experiencing great growth, but they are protecting EBITDA
Yep.
to a certain degree. They're not necessarily reinvesting as aggressively as they normally would because there's just so much political and economic
Yep.
uncertainty. How do you not call that a crisis? Because that is scary, right? In terms of, I don't know what AI is going to do. Do I actually need people to do what I used to do? Like these processes are getting turned upside down. So
Yep.
I'd love to hear from you in terms of, because
Yeah.
I do think that we went from like COVID, and then there was like a heyday for a little bit, and
Yep.
then since then it's been flat in terms
Yeah.
of not everybody, but
Yeah.
general like business performance.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
90% of industries. Almost everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point and a fair push. I think we're at this interesting time where, because to your point, uncertainty is what's actually
Yes.
before us. Uncertainty at almost every level, whether
Every
that's a
level.
societal
Yeah.
level, government level, the way that we show up and treat each other, every like
Yeah.
things have just become really uncertain. My concern is I believe AI is going to be very transformative for sure.
Yeah.
Like hands down, it's going to change the share of workers in terms of like
Yes.
what we need for knowledge workers. I mean, we're
Right.
researchers. I mean,
Yes.
talk about my probably, if we're going to be honest, 30 to 35%
Yep.
of my job I run now through AI
Yeah.
agents, where
Right.
it's helping me with qualitative research,
Right.
design surveys, all that. Don't worry, I still have humans in the loop. My expertise is still there, but
Yeah.
the reality is, I'm like, oh shoot, my job is already turned upside
Yeah.
down in a matter of a couple years. But I still have a hard time as we start to look at the actual economics of
Yeah.
AI. And then there was like this great Wall Street Journal article today actually on this, where the cost of AI is still very expensive. Like all the
Mhm.
token costs are now
Yes.
coming to hit companies and saying,
Yeah.
Uber is the one that's all in the headlines right now. They blew through their AI budget for the year
Yeah.
in 4 months.
Yeah.
And so I think, to your point, what I see it as more of like what we have a problem of
Yeah.
leaders not having courage and conviction to
Mm.
stand by their core business model. This is
Yes.
the value we do. Here's where we need to change.
Right.
And it's almost as if like the panic and crisis has become the core and not
Yeah.
in the peripheral. And I don't see a world changing that quickly and dramatically where
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's a 25% job disruption in the next 18
Right.
months. I actually think AI is being used as a scapegoat for bad
Mm.
leadership decisions and bad business strategy during a pretty turbulent time where there's a
Yeah.
lot of headwinds. I just have really, really rarely see a one-to-one substitute where it's like, okay, maybe I don't need a team of 10 researchers. I need 7 or 8. It's
Mm.
going to be that sort of math.
Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, when you do scenario planning, I think the thing is that, prior to AI, you did scenario planning and there were external factors that you could
Sure.
control, but you could predict a little bit. Like you could
Yeah.
look at historical interest rates. You could look at,
Yeah.
right? And I think the part that's different now is being able to predict and rely on historical kind of performance to then determine
Yeah.
what am I going to face going forward. And I'm sure we'll get there. We're learning a lot. I think with AI, my perception is it's been hugely um, uh, talked about, and I feel like there's a bit of settling in terms of, well, is this actually better, or what's the critical reasoning around this? Like,
Yeah.
it's a cool shiny object, but I don't know if this fits the use case in this scenario. I'm hearing a little bit more of that now.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I know we talked a little bit about, in the 1970s, there was a different way to do
Yeah.
business. AI has also been around since the 1950s, and it's
Yes.
already gone through 2 to 3 hype cycles
Yeah.
where back in the 60s, we thought everyone's going to be not need to work anymore.
Right.
Robots would be doing all these things. These are from very smart people who made these
Right.
predictions, like Nobel winning economist, the guy who started MIT AI lab, media lab.
Yes.
And so it's, to me, I think that's why, when all this panic was happening, I'm like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
think life is cyclical. And I
Yeah.
think business operations are cyclical. So we're in another cycle of AI. Now,
Yeah.
has AI made leaps and bounds in a smaller period of time? Absolutely. There's no doubt
Right.
about that.
Yeah.
But I do worry a bit, to your point, there was a lot more hype
Yeah.
as opposed to how this was going to actually transform.
Yeah.
And this will take probably 7 to 10 years for most businesses to fully get the ROI and the investments they're making today.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I also think because we're also connected, we feel it more. Like if you look at
Yeah, good
30 years
point.
ago, right? you got a newspaper that you read and you watched the news like on 3 channels or whatever that
Yep.
might have been. But now it's
Yep.
like you're in it. It's that chaos that we're a
Yes.
little bit. We keep getting dopamine hits about the world is kind of like totally radically changing in front of our eyes, and
Yes.
a sense of, I don't think hopelessness, but a sense of like what else can I be doing to kind of
Sure.
counter this?
100%.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's spot on.
so tell me a little bit. I mean, we've talked a lot about Gen Z,
Mhm.
and I hear the remarks in terms of the typical stereotypes, and I'm sure your research points to some of that. But how are they showing up to work, and what are some of
Yeah.
the challenges that you're seeing with Gen Z, and opportunities?
Yeah, I think, as an elder millennial, like, I ran on the cusp of
Yeah,
in a millennial Gen X
yeah,
myself. I remember, 20, 25 years ago when we came to the workplace,
yeah.
it also felt like all these stereotypes of like, you guys just want ping pong
Right.
tables and beer kegs and your avocado toast. And it was like,
Foosball.
actually, we
Yeah,
just want to be treated like a decent human being, but
yeah.
okay.
Which,
Um, but I think the reality is like, as I look back now, 25 years ago from when I was entering the corporate
yeah.
world for the first time, here's the difference in the data is Gen Z, 30% of them aspire to leadership positions, meaning
Mm,
70% are looking up and saying, not worth the pay,
yeah. Thank
not worth
you.
the chaos, like not for me.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think from climbing the corporate ladder, I'm not seeing that same one. I
yeah.
don't think that pathway exists to many
Right.
degrees the same way it did maybe for us. And then two, I do think Gen Z is really not thinking it's worth it in many ways.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
way that we've designed leadership today.
yeah.
The other stat that's like super depressing is only 48% of Gen Zers actually think business is doing good. And so
Mm,
52% are really actually concerned that they don't think corporate America is moving in the right direction. It's actually something they are willingly opting out of.
yeah,
And so to me, what I see is more of, when you kind of talk about crisis, is an identity crisis for
yeah,
organizations. Like to your point, IBM, I
yeah.
like couldn't wait to get a job at Deloitte, Accenture, Meta.
Right.
Like these were
Yeah,
the big brands. And now I'm like,
yeah,
with my nephew, I'm like, I don't think I'd
yeah.
go there. Like go, like I would actually recommend something smaller. And I think that's what we're
Right.
going to start to see is the future of work
Oh,
is much smaller.
interesting.
Um, because the economics of a big business no longer makes sense with
Yeah,
AI. And
yeah.
so I think that's part of, anyways, we can talk a little bit about that. So with Gen Z, it is a total upside down world they're
Yeah.
entering into. And I think we're going to see a lot more entrepreneurship. I think we're going to
Mm,
see, honestly, a little bit different pace and
mm,
tone and style. And I think, I work with a lot of baby boomer leaders. It's
yeah.
foreign, it's bizarre, and they think it's rude
Yes.
in those
Yeah.
doors.
Yeah.
And so we've always had a generational gap, but in this particular case, I think we have a chasm
Yeah.
because boomers are trying to hand the baton off and saying, look at this is legacy. This is great. We're
Right.
doing great things. And you've got a generation saying, time out.
Uh,
I'm not sure the planet's going to even be around in 50 to 70 years. Like,
right.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm into this game here.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say, like the one phrase that I find really interesting to hear from my Gen Zers when I do research is they're not into the corporate theatrics. And so
Mm,
they think a lot of what we're doing in from a leadership perspective is performative, it's
yeah.
theatrical, not actually
Yeah.
real, and they have no tolerance for that.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? So I
Oh,
think
I'm like kind of jealous.
I well, and do you think the conviction will stay? Like a lot of,
Great
sometimes it's
question.
a lot of people are like, oh, wait till they have to go pay the rent or pay a
Correct.
mortgage, and they're going to grow out of this kind of principled life, if you
Yes.
will. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely gonna be an element of that. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
easy to be altruistic when
Yeah.
you don't have $10,000 a month and,
Sure.
bills you're paying.
Bill.
The only interesting variable that we're tracking is this will be the largest transfer of wealth between baby
Mm,
boomers and their children, and many of their
in-
children are Gen Z. And
right.
so I think the question is gonna be, does that principled life persist? Not
Yes.
necessarily because they're making six figures, but because
But
there has
they're
been a transfer of wealth.
yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's gonna be, again, as you talk about scenario planning, it's a bit of a
Yeah.
confounding factor to think through. We've never millennials didn't really get handed a bunch of wealth, and
Right.
so we pretty much quickly got back in line as along with Gen
Yeah.
Xers.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of like we've like had angst and resisted along the way, but like we've still very much been like, yeah, I want that leadership position.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we'll be telling it's probably going to be a 50-50 split, and part of it's going to be privilege, right? Depending on whether or
Yeah.
not you're part of that wealth transfer.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't think of that. Yeah. And then, as parents, do you say like it's a huge opportunity to let your kids go do good in the world.
Right.
Right. And is that a positive thing? I mean, there's all kinds of questions around that, but
Yes,
I do admire their conviction. It's quite refreshing.
it
In terms
is.
of yeah, in terms of
It
being
was
really concerned about larger macro issues.
100%. I was just doing a focus group with interns at a large law firm. So
Yeah.
you're, these are like 22, 23-year-olds
Right.
who are just coming out of law school or just finishing law school, I should say, and then trying to get to a big law firm.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating because if I think about like 15, 20 years ago, the drive would have been going into corporate law and,
Yeah.
making money or starting your own private practice. Almost every person, there's about 7 people at this round table. One was going into energy, trying to solve
Mhm.
climate crisis,
Right.
energy, trying to regulate data centers. Someone else was going into much more of kind of a healthcare legal
Yeah.
realm. And so it was super interesting. I mean, these are the top of the top. We're
Yeah.
talking Harvard grads, Stanford
Yeah.
grads. And their appeal was not to what I would have thought at
Right.
that age, if
Right.
that makes sense. They
Yeah.
were thinking much bigger. And I'm like, wow, you guys are really wide
I
awake to
know.
what's happening out
I
here.
know. I mean, the younger generation also is really strongly concerned about AI and its impact on the environment.
Yes.
I get dinged by my children quite often in terms of, do you like your drinking water? Um, you have a role here in terms of
Yes.
how you contribute to the climate, but
Yeah,
it's all learning.
it is.
So, Kelly, tell me, like, I'm a leader, you're a leader. There's so
Yeah,
many leaders out there that are really struggling to connect generations, like connect
yeah,
empathy and, not we've evolved in terms of saying, people are lazy and they need micromanagement, but you want to uncover and motivate Gen Z to kind of come along in terms of corporate goals and objectives. And I know you work with a lot of leaders. What
yeah.
advice could you give leaders as they think about this?
Yeah, I think, I'll give you a preview of what I talk about in
Sure.
my new book because it's called The
Okay.
Plot Frame. Okay, so it's called Reclaim
Yes.
the Plot. So it's a
Yes.
plot framework. And here's the 4 ways that I'm trying to help leaders
Okay.
rethink the way that they're showing up every day, especially with the younger generation.
Sure.
The first is power. And
Yeah.
so sharing power. And that's really hard for us as leaders is because we're, the ones with the power,
Right.
expertise. But the very first thing that AI is going to democratize is our
Is knowledge.
expertise and intelligence,
Yeah.
right? Knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it's like we have to understand our position of power is actually
Right.
already being somewhat softened with
Yeah.
AI. And we have to accept that and share that with the younger generation coming up. Don't wait until 10 or 15 years
Right.
to start sharing power. The second thing is listening. We have to do a better job listening. And it's not just, oh, let me have a pulse survey. It's
Yeah.
what do you do as a leader when truth is surfaced? So
Okay.
as people are onboarding into your organization, having a new point of view, and they're speaking truth
Yeah.
outside in perspective, how do you respond?
Mhm.
And so it's making sure that you're listening. Third thing is ownership. It's really beginning to own the outcomes for the next generation and making sure that the decisions we're making today that we feel a sense of ownership, not just for our careers, but for the
Mhm.
people coming up behind us. That's our legacy.
Or like a long
And
game.
the long game, again,
Yeah.
going back to the chess checkers, like
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
start playing chess here for them.
Yeah.
And then the fourth thing is trust, which we've already hit on. And that is
Mhm.
what if we start from a position of we're going to trust this next generation is going to do things differently, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And we're going to trust that where they're focused on and where they want to go may be the right direction. And how
Right.
do I, as a leader, help cultivate, maybe
Yeah.
put up guardrails and watch outs from our years of
Right.
experience, but trust that they are going to lead and usher in a new world of work and that we okay with that. So that's a lot of what I'm talking about in the new book. And when I'm on the keynote
Yeah.
circuit right now is unpacking the plot framework and helping leaders rewrite their story.
And I guess the fundamental principle there is that you have quote unquote the right people on the team. Right.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Because in a world of AI, I think people are really wondering, like, what kind of talent do I need? Like, what's the role I don't have at the table right now that I might need in the future? And can can people traverse this kind of ambiguity as part of the team?
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a fantastic point. And I'm just responding because I'm working on a thought leadership piece that's going to be released next month. And it's actually addressing this question
Yeah.
of like, what are the skills? Like, who
Yeah.
do I need on my team to
Yeah.
navigate this? PwC has provided a really cool framework. They've got 30 skills they began to actually track and chart out for
Nice.
human AI collaboration. But I think to your point, it is a combination of technical skill
Uh-huh.
sets as well as scenario planning, strategic
Yeah.
planning, complexity. And that's where my concern is we haven't taught either of those very
Right.
well in
Yeah.
university settings. Everything has been pretty rote. There's an answer to
Yeah.
everything. And we actually need, a different sort of skill set.
Yeah.
Again, I think the freelancer market is a great place to look because anyone who has had to learn how to be entrepreneurial is going to have some resilience and grit to
Sure.
figure things out and deal with, I don't know
Yeah.
where my next paycheck's coming from.
Right.
So that's kind of the mindset though that you want. You want someone who's thinking like that and not just expected that this is going to happen just because
Yeah.
I show up every day, and I think that's
Yeah.
probably part of the challenge we've got to overcome.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think when we talk about the democratization of knowledge and
Mm.
learning, um, I still feel like there's so many differences that people come to the table with content that's depending on which LLM they're like querying.
Oh,
And so you get to the table and there's like asymmetric information because people have queried whatever their best tool is. And I
yeah,
don't know if you've seen companies kind of create I don't want to say governance because that sounds overarching, but
yeah,
a model where like this is truth. This is how you get
yeah.
truth in terms of knowledge. And let's work on a common foundation of truth, and build from there. Have companies focused on that?
I love that you're pushing on that. The one thing that I'm helping leaders with right now that companies I think are beginning to realize that they don't
Yeah.
have what you just described, and so is principles.
Yeah.
To at least have a set of principles around, to your point, kind of a common vernacular. This is what
Yeah.
truth is within
Right.
our organization. This is how we're going to use the tools. And I think, when you talk about the asymmetry, depending on the tool you use, when anyone asks me, well, Kelly, how would you define AI skills or AI literacy?
Right.
The very first thing I start with has nothing to do with AI. It's domain expertise. Because no matter
Uh,
what tool you have, if you don't have
yes.
domain expertise, you're going to end up with wild asymmetry
Yeah.
information and you won't even be aware of that. And that's
Sure.
what keeps me up at night is
Yeah.
how much is being produced. We have a uptick in quantity and we're lowering quality. You just go on LinkedIn
Mhm.
and you can see it. The second thing is then just having a basic understanding of statistics.
Yeah.
All these large language models are operating on probabilities. And yes, they're getting fancier and learning from
Right.
themselves, but the underlying mechanics still, if you have a
Yeah.
basic understanding of statistics, helps demystify a bit of
Yeah.
where the probabilities are headed. And then finally, I think where people are going to need to figure out is where do you build your own AI tools and then where do you
Yeah.
buy, And I think making those decisions, most organizations haven't figured that part out yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll be interesting because like even with prompts, right? Like if you democratize, let's say research and people
Yep.
can create their own prompts, they're going to get different results. And so how do you create that common vernacular, even just in market research and the historical data of how people query the tools?
Oh, 100%. I don't know if you guys got into this world, but this whole like surveying AI agents and using
Yes.
them as personas.
Yes.
I was talking to my old colleague over at Accenture Research,
Yeah.
and he wrote a fascinating piece because they're not performing well in terms of validating and replicating human responses. Like
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of divergence when you do the same
Right.
survey to humans versus AI agents. And that to me just is the chasm of like why AI, I think, is going to have such a hard time replicating a true human job because we are actually irrational. We're not
Right.
that linear. And
Yeah.
oftentimes what we say may mismatch what we do. And so, anyways, I think it'll be a really interesting
It'll
time
be
in the research
interesting.
space. But I'm like, please, God, don't have a whole bunch of research come out that's like AI agents is telling us what we want.
It's like that the new true. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you in terms of if you had a crystal ball, which I know you
Yeah.
don't, what do you think the future looks like in terms of the workforce? Like, what is it? Less people, more? Give me your own
Yeah.
kind of thoughts on that.
I think what we're going to see is a rebalanced workforce. So I think for the last, call it 10, 15 years, we have over rotated towards STEM, which
Yeah.
has been great. It has been,
Yeah.
that's where the premium wages have been. That is
Right.
where we tell a lot of kids, go get a computer science degree, you'll have
Yeah.
a future-proof career. Well, computer science degree is the third most unemployed college degree out there right now
Really?
if you're 21 and 25. And
Wow.
so to me, and you see all the mass layoffs happening in the tech
Yeah.
industry, and
Yeah.
tech benefited from the pandemic. I mean, I was at Meta at the time
Yes.
because customer behavior, we had to all move online if you
Of
wanted to
course.
still interact.
Yeah.
So now we're kind of right sizing. And so I think what's going to happen is you've got all this great STEM educated workers. And I think the best thing is to go into healthcare, to go into education, to go into manufacturing, construction, to go into the physical world
Yeah.
industries, retail, hospitality that are evergreen. We will always need people doing great
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
And as I think through that, so I see a future where the market's going to get labor market anyways will be
Yeah.
rebalanced to better
Yeah.
match supply and demand. The problem is going to be is do wages follow?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be part of the rebalancing is what becomes a new premium
Mm.
career pathway. It is probably going to continue to be technology and working with AI. However, that labor share is going to be much smaller.
More.
And
Yeah.
so I think we look at either an optimistic or pessimistic future is how do we deal with the inequality that's going to continue to grow between the small share of workers who work along and build AI products
Yeah.
versus everyone else. And then
Yeah.
everyone else is probably 75 to 80% of the workforce. And so
Right.
in some ways I'm optimistic because when I work with hospital systems right now, they cannot wait to get this tech talent. You know, they've
Sure.
been waiting for it.
Yes.
But they also know they can't pay the same wages. And in
Right.
maybe the long term, that's okay, but it's going to be a bumpy transition.
I do worry about the people that are, getting laid off and, potentially not being able to get a job and to a certain degree have to retool their skills.
Yes.
And can they retool fast enough to be able to get employment and be able to support families? Because it does feel like the labor market will shrink,
Hmm.
given AI and technology enhancements, but I don't know where that workforce goes.
Yeah. I mean, the only hope I have is like the one stat I go back to is 6 out of 10 of us are
Yeah.
working a job that didn't exist before 1940. So
Oh, cool.
60% of us are in
Yeah.
jobs that
Yeah.
weren't even created. And
Yes.
so I am still hopeful. It's a little unclear of what that kind
Yes.
of new work is going to look like.
Right.
I mean, according to my nephew, it's all about like YouTube influencers. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
oh
was gonna
God,
say
like
be an
please no.
influencer, right? Yeah.
But so I am looking to see as much as we're going to
Yeah.
have creative destruction is where does the creative
Yeah.
value begin to emerge? And that won't emerge if leaders keep using AI to just take costs out of their business.
Yeah.
And so that's my other concern is
Yeah.
leaders, how do we actually make this a creative opportunity tool? Not the creative destruction tool is we can see as clear as day.
Yes.
Where is that offset and that rebalancing? And I don't see enough people asking that
Yeah.
or actually focused on that.
Yeah. I love it. And also the other thing is humans are resilient, right?
Oh, 100%.
They do we do what we need to do to survive. And so
100%.
yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. To your point, I love that stat.
Yeah.
60% of the jobs weren't here prior to 1940. Is that right?
That's
Did I get
correct.
that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's
That's pretty
100%
amazing.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. This is fascinating. I feel like I could talk to you for hours about this topic.
Oh, same. It's been so fun. Thank you so much for having
Thank
me
you.
back.
And let me ask you, when your book comes out, where can people find it?
Yes. So you can go to reclaimtheplotbook.com. There's previews out there. You can see who's endorsed, all that fun stuff, and learn more about it. And by all means, find me on LinkedIn. More than happy to connect that way as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much.